Hey, what's going on? Um, this is really just going to be a test. Um, so, I'm a competitive fencer. I started with 4 years, or no, 7 years of foil and 4 years of saber. Uh, so, I saw, being a fencer, I've seen a lot of, um, examples of fencing in movies and TV shows, and there's very little that gets done right, and I'm sure anyone who fences who sees this will agree with me. Um, and a lot of it, I can understand why. There are some things you had to change just to make it suitable for not just showing it on camera, but also showing it as entertainment to people who don't really know, uh, how to fence or any of the rules or anything like that. But other times it just is surprising how many things they get wrong. There are some times where I think the whoever directed it was trying to get things wrong. It's almost like they did it on purpose. So I'm going to be doing some review videos of these and seeing how that plays out. So this first video is basically not just an introduction, but also sort of like a test, just to not really see how much people want to see it, but mainly just how it goes for me. It's just something I want to try out. So I figured the very first fencing scene that I want to try and review is the probably the most famous and well known, which is the fencing scene from The Parent Trap, 1998. So let's go ahead and give it a watch. And I'll pause it every now and then just to bring up something.
Good job.
Okay, several things right off the bat. First of all, what they're doing is a style called foil. Um, very first thing about it is a thrust weapon. The foil you only score with the tip of the blade. So there is no cutting in it. And immediately when they show them fencing, they're slashing, they're cutting. The official term is cut, um, which you never do in foil. Um, it's not that it's technically not allowed, it just will not accomplish anything. Um, if you hit with the side of the blade because you're cutting, specifically in foil, it's actually not even called a cut in foil. It's called a slap, uh, and it does nothing. It if they were hooked up, or if they had judges watching them, if they're fencing dry, which they are, and for those who don't know, fencing dry just means fencing without electrical equipment designed to detect hits. So in that case, you would either go by just like the honor agreement, if you're just practicing, or before electrical equipment was invented for this, you would use judges who would watch, and there were a few other things that they did, but I'm not gonna go into that right now. So if the side of the blade slaps your opponent, which is definitely what happens if you're cutting like they were, then uh, nothing would register. A machine would not detect a hit, judges would not stop the action, and so there's no way to score. So why would you do it? So that was the very first thing, is they're not even attacking. They're waving their blades at each other. And then second, she spun around. She did a little twirl. That's not allowed. As soon as you turn your back to your opponent, the ref is supposed to call halt, and depending on the situation, you can even get a penalty for it. Something called a yellow card, which is basically a warning, but multiple yellow cards lead to red cards, which means every red card is a touch for your opponent. So you are not encouraged to spin around like that. And then you could argue that the protagonist hitting her opponent so hard that he fell down, that could possibly be another penalty, something known as touches made with brutality. Although that would be a stretch. They're kids, they don't really know what they're doing. So if that kind of thing happened in like a fencing camp for youth, I don't think anyone would actually hold it against them. It would just be an accident. But the final thing, and this is a small thing, he said touche. It's actually pronounced touche. It's points in fencing are known as touches, and the French term is with an E at the end and a little accent mark above it, and that is pronounced touche. So touche is a mispronunciation, but again, that's a small thing. So let's keep going.
All right, excellent, kids. The winner and still undefeated champ from Napa, California, Miss Hallie Parker. Let's not be damned who's in distress here.
I'll take a whack at it.
Okay, we've got ourselves a challenger. Shoot up.
Here I go. Thanks.
Okay. This is an example of what I mentioned before about them changing the rules to better fit the movie. In this case, they both put on their mask before actually facing each other. This is done so that the whole reveal that they look exactly alike is done at a more appropriate time. In reality, that also doesn't really happen. In fencing, there is a lot of sportsmanship involved. And what that has to do with the masks is if you're wearing your mask, obviously your opponent can't make out your face. This, in certain situations, can be seen as a sign of disrespect. So before and after every bout, even in practice, you approach your opponent with your mask off. If you're hooked up electrically, this is also the opportunity to test the weapons, make sure they're all plugged in, but they are fencing dry, so they don't have to worry about that. But they do still have to approach their opponent with their mask off and salute their opponent. They salute their opponent, they salute the ref, and they salute the audience, if there is one. And this is actually required. If you refuse to do that, you can get what's called a black card. If you just flat out refuse to do it. And black card means expulsion from the tournament. And depending on the club's individual policy, the fencing club's individual policy, you could even get kicked out of that. So most of the time it comes with the warning, like, the ref saying if you refuse to salute, then you're out. So you really have to want it in order to get a black card for that. But you must salute and basically, acknowledge your opponent with your mask up, showing your face. It can't be sitting on top of your head. I forgot to bring a mask with me, of course, for my very first video to demonstrate. But it can't be sitting on top of your head and it's just pulled up, like the bill of my hat, so that still shows your face. And then you salute, and then you pull it down. If you salute with your mask down, the ref, they won't card you for that. They'll just remind you, lift your mask, and then you salute. So you have to be showing your face. So again, they changed it for the sake of the movie, but in real life, that would not be allowed.
Fencers ready?
Ready. Full set.
On guard! Fence!
Okay, I know I'm probably pausing this a lot, but there is a lot to digest. Very first, right off the bat, they are too close. They are much too close. In between actions, fencers start 4 meters apart. They're clearly not 4 meters apart. In foil, it is possible for an action to be stopped and no one to score. In that case, then the fencers resume fencing when the ref calls halt, or when the ref says fence. But in that case, they don't start 4 meters apart again in the middle of the strip. They start wherever on the strip the action was stopped, and they're a little closer than 4 meters. I think it's 3 or even 2. I think it's 2. And basically, how they measure that is each fencer fully extends their arm, and then the 2 points of each weapon cannot intersect. So, if these were weapons, then the tips of their blades would be here, with both fencers fully extending their arms. If they were like this, the ref would say, both of you take half a step back. So right off the bat, they are extremely close to each other. The only time two fencers should be that close before fencing is if they're in a drill. And then, of course, it's not really effective when they actually start to just hit one side of the blade, go around, do the other, one side, other side, so on and so forth. So this is not fencing, this is playing with metal sticks. As much as I wish you could jump off trees or other surrounding pieces of furniture in a club in order to get the jump on your opponent, it's not allowed. You had to stay on the strip, and the strip must have like a clear space around it. And then, of course, she did her little twirly thing again, which means she showed her back to the opponent. And now they're going off their designated area. I understand they don't have a strip laid out. That's fine for practice, but, you compete on a strip, so you should practice on a strip, But either way, they are well outside of the bounds of that, and that is not allowed. So from here on out, where it's not even a semblance of fencing, it's just them having a modern action sequence with no blood. That is dangerous. That is extremely dangerous. Getting near those kids who do not have masks would be grounds for, I don't know. I do know that if any coach saw one of their students, no matter how young or how new they were to the sport, get near other unarmed, unmasked kids while still waving their blades around, they would probably, they'd probably just yell at them, say, "Stop it, never do that again, you're going to take out someone's eye." So yeah, the whole kids running away laughing, that's not realistic. It is just dangerous. You don't touch your opponent with your other hand. You'll notice she placed her hand on her opponent and shoved her. First time you do that, I forget some of the exact order of the penalties. I think the first time you do that, that's depending on the situation, that could either be a red card, a warning, or probably just a straight black card. And now, of course, you're doing gymnastics. But again, this is all off the strip, so it's even less realistic.
Touche! Nice catch. Thanks.
So what's funny is that there's something there that is realistic and also not at the same time. I realize that makes a ton of sense. First of all, when she did her little yawn to, pretend, oh, this is nothing for me, a ref would probably give you a penalty for that. At the very least, a yellow card. You are not, that is considered unsportsmanlike conduct and it is not allowed. Any sort of disrespect like that towards your opponent is not allowed. Sportsmanship is taken very seriously in fencing. That wasn't the realistic part. The realistic part was actually the little exchange of just a few words between them. Technically that's not allowed. And in competition it doesn't happen. But in a practice, I have seen that happen. And I've also done it where there are just, in the lull between actions, but things are still going on. So, when you're fencing but not directly engaging your opponent, uh, if it's in practice, yeah, it happens. Just like little just quips here and there. So nothing that you'd see in a lot of other movies. It's not banter. It's just you saying something to someone who's probably a friend. That's just a few words long.
Sorry, let me help you. No, let me help you. What'd you do that for? Me, you pushed.
A fencer immediately rushing to the aid of another fencer who has fallen on accident is very common. Um, Despite how it looks, especially the more popular demonstrations of fencing, which is like World Cups, Olympics, stuff like that, where it looks like people are really going at it, they're actually, they're not fighting each other, they're just competing. So as soon as someone, trips and falls or, gets injured or something like that, they'll immediately stop. And a lot of times that happens on recordings, on, videos. People will immediately, like, their opponent will just immediately rush up to them and be like, oh my god, are you okay? So that's realistic. Obviously, their opponent um, grabbing their hand and pulling them into the water, that is not realistic. That's just a, I know she's a kid, but that's an asshole move right there.
Me in. I did not.
Okay, that was quite a show. All right, I think we got ourselves a new camp champ from London, England, Miss Annie J.
I really want to know how she could determine a winner from that, because I didn't notice a thing. I don't see how she could even pretend.
All right, girls, shake hands. Come on, girls.
So this is the last thing that I'm going to mention for this. That shaking hands thing, like being forced to do it, that's another thing that you have to do that some people who aren't fencers might find surprising at first. At the end of a bout, when you are finished, you go back to your on guard lines, which is the 4 meters apart that I mentioned earlier. You take your mask off, you salute your opponent, the ref, and the audience again, and then you shake with your non gloved hand. So for a right-handed versus a right-handed fencer or left-handed versus a left-handed fencer, it's very easy. It's just a normal shaking of hands. If it's a right-handed versus a left-handed, then they have to do the awkward, like, kind of off to the, shaking with the same side, essentially. And it's weird. But, yeah, it is required. And if you refuse to shake hands of your opponent, you are kicked out. You will be black carded. And that's not good. So this is the end of the fencing period. So, yeah, there were a few things that they got right, but for the most part, it was just riddled with faults. And like I said, I get it. It has to be entertaining. And modern fencing, if you don't know what you're looking for, if you're not actually, informed about it, it can be very hard to follow. So I get making it entertaining for audiences, making it easier to follow, more like a fantasy sword fight than, modern fencing. But it's really just inaccurate. But it is fun to watch and to pick apart. And I guess that's the purpose of movies. I guess as long as people realize that this is just entertainment and not informative, then it's fine. So yeah, that's my review of the fencing scene from The Parent Trap. Um, I'll probably do a few more videos like this. I have a few clips and even a whole show lined up that I really would like to review, because a lot of times, you find something that they're doing wrong and it's just funny. So I'll try and get around to that later on. But I'm not totally sure how I'm going to share this. I'll probably upload it to YouTube and probably share it to some friends and family who are obligated to watch. But let me know how it went, what you think, and if you have any other suggestions, feel free to let me know. Probably in the comments, because I probably will upload this to YouTube. So yeah, let me know in the comments if there's another fencing scene that you'd like to see. I'm going to stay away from any sort of historical fencing, any SCA, HEMA, stuff like that, because I just don't know enough about it. I've tried rapier fencing once, and I have a few friends who do historical martial arts, but I'm going to stay away from those. So I'm just going to be sticking to modern fencing depictions. So that does kind of limit my options, but I don't want to review and comment on something that I don't really know much about. So yeah, let me know what you thought. Let me know if you have any suggestions, and have a good day.